COVID risks as well as a separate paper to this committee. So fundamentally 3 parts to this paper. The first one is the financial implications on the 2019-20 year. Tauranga is a little bit different to a lot of other councils in the country in that the bulk of its rates have been collected as it runs a 2 instalment process. So you may see a number of councils dealing with their 4th instalment at present. We've already collected 98% of our rates for this year based on our February instalment. So a little bit different position from that perspective. However, we have still had significant impacts on our user fee revenue, currently forecast to be around 10 million down. That includes bay venues as the largest component of that. Net impact of that is in terms of a deficit for the year is expected to be just over 5 million greater than what we had planned from a budget perspective. So that's driven largely from that cash revenue being down. From a rating perspective, we're not expecting to see any sort of surplus deficit in that area. The other side of that is our capital program is also down because of the level 4 lockdown now coming to level 3. We still expect it to be some 30 to 50 million less than what was planned. The net impact of that is our debt is a little bit under what we had planned at 525 million for the year, and again the ratio, including bay venues at 200%, which is a little bit less than what we had actually planned. Just point out most of that though is clearly timing difference. It's due to the fact that the level 4 lockdown has meant that capital budget hasn't gone forward. So that's the 2019-20 year. The second part of the paper then moves into 2021 in terms of the annual plan. We spoke recently about a revenue number being some 53 to 77 million down. Just some more work and clarification around our rating numbers within that. Now the forecast, depending on the scenarios we run, is between 40 and 77 million. Main implication of that is going to be obviously in terms of what level of capital expenditure we can deliver, because it does push us right to the level of that debt to revenue ratio up over the 235 and close to 250%. So impact of that, and it's shown in the graphs attached to the report, of a capital program significantly less than what was planned. And then the last section of the paper just talks about financial risk and risk management. Most of them are covered with what I've already said. The big risks are around our ability to actually debt fund our program, particularly with that revenue dropping off. So that's the key of the paper. Like I said, it'll be we're doing a bigger exercise at the moment in terms of working through scenarios, updating those revenue forecasts. That will impact on that 40 to 77 million gap. As we do that will continue to be refined in terms of what those financial forecasts looks like, implications both on this year and next year's annual plan, and we'll keep that coming back to this committee. So at this point, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. That's brilliant. Your paper's very clear. And by the way, it looks like, Kelvin, we have you on board now, which is great.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Yeah, no, well done. We recorded an apology for your lateness, but knew that you were attempting to try and get in, so no worries.
Thank you.
Okay, so look, Paul, thank you for that update. That's very helpful. As you say, there's a combination of both current position, but also stuff that probably council is reasonably familiar with. Given that we're having trouble with the chat function, what I'd like to do is indeed go, as I proposed, around the table in alphabetical order. And I'd ask you to make certain that you do ask a question. If you want to say, look, I've got 2 questions, and I think we do have time that if as a result of Paul and his team answering, there is a follow-up question you'd like to have, I'm comfortable that we actually take that. But obviously the emphasis is on please being reasonably to the point and discreet. So according to my alphabetical list, and despite my desire to be called Bruce, all I've got you is by your final name, so I better make certain that I say it right. So Councillor Arbery, or Jacko, if you could lead off the batting, please, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah, for pronunciation, it's Yako with a Y instead of a J.
Thank you, Yako. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So my main question would be, with the annual plan process, that's quite a traditional type budgeting process? Is there any scope for us to move to maybe beyond budgeting techniques, or maybe being a bit more flexible in the upcoming annual plan as our situation changes?
Yep, thanks, Jaco. Good question. The answer is obviously that the annual plan is going to move quite a lot between, or potentially move quite a lot between now and June. And one of the things that I think is absolutely worth looking at is how we can actually keep some flexibility whilst remaining within the parameters that we have to from a Local Government Act perspective into next year as well. So some of that beyond budgeting and more, agile and flexible budgeting may be part of that, but we just need to work that through, particularly in line with what we have to do under the Local Government Act. So, we're still required in terms of certain level of service measures and that sort of stuff to comply with that. But it would be great to be able to build some more flexibility in, because obviously things will change beyond July.
Yeah. And is there any scope to have flexibility once the annual plan is set? So can we be flexible past July?
Yeah, I think that's the challenge we will need to work with. I think there's two parts to that. One is trying to build some flexibility into our final annual plan, whatever that may look like, and how we can do that best. Secondly, we do have flexibility under delegations and the ability of council, but sitting within overall financial parameters. So again, it comes back to ultimately we need to sit within the Local Government Act. Any significant changes normally require some form of consultation. So that's probably the main thing, that there's room to move, but it's limited room within what the legislation we sit within.
Yeah. Okay. No, thank you.
Thanks, Jaco. I'm sure, as I said, we'll find time if you have follow-up questions at a later stage. Once you've had everybody, we may well do that. So, Councillor Border, your questions, please.
Thank you, Bruce. Morning, Paul. Can I just ask you to sort of expand and explain a little bit the paragraph C, the rates reduction assumed range from a figure close to the 2021 total revenue adjusted for growth through to 7.6. I'm assuming that we're out consulting on 7.6, so that's the scenario. I'm just not clear on what you mean by the first part of that statement, please.
Thanks, Councillor Baldock. So in the scenarios we did, we picked 7.6 as sort of at the top end and no change to that rating revenue, and then modelled that down effectively in terms of going down to no increase in the rates number. So it's between 0 and 7.6 effectively is where that modelling. And I think what I said the other day is there's also what we don't know as an element of that's the percentage increase. There's also an element of under collection, which we haven't done any detailed work around at this point. Like, as I said, we've got Q2 instalment collected. We know, I think Catherine's told me this morning, that we're not seeing a lot of movement in direct debits, just over 1% of those being requested to be cancelled or changed. But we're also monitoring what other councils do from in terms of their Q4 instalments, just to see what what sort of default risk exists within that as well. So ultimately, the modelling at the moment is just based on the percentage increase, 7.6 being what we're out for consultation and no change, through to removing that down to a 0% number, which would obviously create a revenue gap within there.
And so if I may, a supplementary just on that, because for me it's not crystal clear when you talk about modelling from that range. We'd normally have modelling 1, 2, 3 on the different actual specific rate increases or not. When you're in paragraph B and you talk about a revenue shortfall of 40 to 77, is that what you mean as the range of the rate take, or is that just the uncertainties of other revenue from other sources?
Yeah, so it's combined. So at the 40 million number, it would be assumed that 7.6% is the rate increase that remains. At the 77 million number, it would be a 0%, would be the assumed number. But there's obviously the additional user fee revenue is the balance of that number that makes that movement.
All right, thank you, Paul. That's crystal clear. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate that. Councillor Granger. Oh no, sorry, Claire. Sorry, I'm going too fast. Sorry, that's not any.
That's
You
fine.
need to hurry up. Sorry about that.
No, that's
Go
fine.
on.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, just a couple of questions. Paul, in paragraph 4E, you reference our forecast debt to revenue ratio of 211%, and then you put in brackets 199% including BVL. We've never had that reference before, so I'm just wondering why you've put that in specifically, and if the 211 is the sort of the standard measurement that you'd be using rather than including BVL. Can you just explain, please?
Yes, Councillor Clout. So I'm just trying to think whether it was last year or the year before. We had agreement with Standard & Poor's and local government funding agency to include bay venues in our ratio. So we are now, the number we report and the number that both LGFA and Standard & Poor's focus on is the group number. So that does include bay venues, which is good while they're having revenue in terms of making that ratio stronger.
So supplementary to that, with BVL's revenue dropping quite significantly, I mean, that's going to have quite a big impact on our group debt to revenue ratio, right?
That's right. But if you looked at it at a TCC level, it wouldn't make any difference anyway, because the debt is all held within council. So any revenue coming into bay venues helps. If they've got none, it makes a no worse situation effectively to what we have.
Thank you. And just one other question, if you don't mind. Paragraph 7G, talking about the financial risks and uncertainties, and with LGFA raising finance, to meet demands of councils. I read somewhere that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand is looking to directly invest in LGFA bonds. Is that right? And if so, would that be of assistance in terms of funding for councils around New Zealand?
Yes, that's correct, and that statement is correct that Reserve Bank has said that they are looking at investment in local government bonds, and yes, it is of assistance in terms of making sure that we have liquidity in the market to borrow from. Obviously, it still becomes problematic in terms of those ratios, but it does give us, greater ability in the domestic market to borrow, which is needed.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all my questions at this point. Thanks a lot.
Cool, Calvin. That's great. So, Councillor Granger, please.
Hey, thank you, Bruce. Only just one for the time being as regards to the possible government funding package. Is there any idea of when? That's a tough question, but I just want to know, is there any idea of and the possibility of any local bodies going to get notification of what they get?
So, Councillor Granger, the only information, and the Chief Executive or Christine can jump in as well if they know more than me, but is that we'll be notified sometime early to mid-May in terms of the next stage of the Crown Investment Partners program. That doesn't necessarily mean that we'll know the outcome of it. We'll just know the next stages of it. So unclear in terms of a definitive time frame at this point. What we have done is made it clear with in terms of the timetables that local government is working to adopt an annual plan. So that is known by the decision makers in terms of that process.
Yes, so clarity as regards to the annual plan, we have extended that through to late July. Is that correct, or is that in our intention?
That's one scenario we are working to, is that it may go to late July in terms of an adoption of annual plan. Yes.
Thanks, Paul.
I'd reflect from my experience with other councils. That's Bill, a very real proposition for a fair amount of local government. Is the need for it to consider in effect adopting their annual plans late. As well, the central authorities are well aware of that at this stage. Councillor Hollis, please.
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Hey, Paul, how much of the lost revenue range, the 37 million, is covered by the rates dial, so to speak, the 0 to 7.6 range?
So 13 million is the total number.
All right.
in terms of at the 40 million, it's 13 million less rating income.
Okay, thank you.
That's all, Andrew?
Yeah, that'll do for now. Thanks.
Great, mate. Thank you. Councillor Hughes.
No questions, thank you.
Great. Councillor Kitty.
No questions, thank you.
Great. Councillor Morris.
G'day, thank you, Bruce. Paul, what discussions have been held between either Tauranga City Council or the local government sector and LGFA around net debt to revenue ratios? And is there any appetite or potential for those to increase?
It's a good question. The answer is that those conversations are happening, have been happening, and will continue to happen. And I guess all I would say is that there's probably some trepidation on the part of a lot of people in terms of going there, but they certainly, it is recognised that temporary changes to the limit may be something that need to be explored. The idea of temporary is concerning. It's I guess it's of concern to Tauranga. Pre-COVID, our plan was adding to those ratios on a yearly basis, and therefore the ability to go back from a temporary increase would be difficult and challenging. So it is an option. It's it's probably for some people a preferred option, for others it's not. I think we've had a lot of conversations in the past about what it may mean for the local government funding agency in terms of its credit quality for the whole sector, and that is of concern. But we're in unprecedented times as well. So conversations are there, but what I would say is there's probably three big areas where the conversations are happening. One is the central government support, whether it be through any sort of revenue or through off-balance sheet type models. The other is that ratio itself, and then the other is just in terms of revenue and expenditure budgets. So there are multiple ways of dealing with it. But they are happening. I guess the level of appetite for it, I don't know whether, Bruce, you've got any further information, but there's not a strong appetite for change.
Yes, as I understand it, the LGF, I don't think there's been any official pronouncement, but there may be actually others in the room that are better qualified to speak than I am. But there is a reasonable indication, Andrew, of a desire not to change the ratio. That actually there are other levers in the way that Paul has suggested that should be built into it rather than actually changing the ratio. The other thing, of course, is actually where does our rating agencies stand on that as well, because ultimately they're the ones that have a pretty strong determination on how much we pay for our debt. So I think, yes, the answer is most likely there will not be a change. But I mean, that's all subject to the ongoing debate, which reflects the difficulty of the period we're in. You have more questions, Andrew? You're welcome to ask them if you have.
Yep, supplementary, Steve. No, that's all right. DIA, obviously there's a policy pronouncement there around 250%. Any movement or any discussions with them? I mean, obviously there are other sources of finance that we can get, but any movement or news from DIA's perspective around their instruction to councils to keep under 250%?
No, not that I'm aware of. No, most of those conversations have been with at local government funding agency or, as Bruce says, rating agency levels, not DIA that I'm aware of.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers.
Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that. Timby P. Mayor Powell.
No, Timby's fine. Thanks, Bruce. No, I'm all good. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. I suppose
I'm looking at the supporting financial information for the draft 2021 annual plan. Now, that's currently sitting in the public domain, and people are, if they've bothered to get that far through our website, may well be looking at those numbers and currently making submissions against those numbers. And I'm just wondering when we might be able to give the public a little bit more detail, not line by line, but at that sort of activity level, so they can see what our thinking is. I'm conscious at the moment that even this report, elected members are asking questions just to go below an immediate top line. So question to staff basically is, when are we going to give the public a bit more granularity about what's driving some of these forecast numbers? And I have a supplementary as well.
So through the chair, and Catherine, correct me if I'm wrong, but the detailed budget book has been loaded up on the website together with all the supporting documentation. There was no plan to do any further information in terms of the supporting documentation, the consultation document, and that detailed budget book is what's available to the budget, to the public. Also to note that, as we talk about in this paper, that there is a strong likelihood that we'll need to be going out to reconsult at some point anyway. But there's no intention to provide any additional information to what's on the website at present.
Which neatly leads to my supplementary, if I may, Bruce. Surely if we're going to go and reconsult, we do need to update the numbers in that book. And I'm conscious of the fact that there are a couple of errors in that book. We know it went out quite quickly. But my question is, we're reconsulting, surely we're going out with an updated set of numbers, and are we going out at that activity level? That's my question. So
it's so Councillor Robson, so yes, we would need to update our supporting documentation if we did reconsult, but it would be intended to be at the same level of detail as what the current document looks like, and we could look, if there was desire of elected members to look at some additional changes to that, we could look at it at the time, but at this point there's no intention for it to be any different.
Okay, in which case, last point, Bruce, there has been some discussion amongst elected members about a couple of layers, for instance, separating staff and supplier lines in there. But we just need to think about how we communicate, if you like, what the EMs might or might not be feeling around the current information. But yeah, if someone can just note that somewhere. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. Certainly what we tell the ratepayers is really important. Tina, do you have any questions, please?
Thank you. I just have one supplementary to Councillor Morris's around the debt to revenue ratio. We are proposing moving that from 225 to 235. Are there any risks or implications in us moving our own self-imposed ratio to 245?
Through the chair, no, there's no. Well, there is risk, which I'll come to in a moment. Just for clarity, there is no firm limit except the 250. In the past, we've had a financial strategy limit at 225, and it's been something that we've worked to try and keep some borrowing capacity in the by actually having it a lower number than 250. The risk of where you go above 235 is, I know it sounds a strange comment in today's environment, but another unexpected event is where that risk comes about. So if we go back to the May 2005 floods, that was in the order of 80 million of additional capex, loan-funded capex, that came on our books over a period of time after that. So the reason why we try to keep it below that 250 at the 235 level is for those unexpected events as they occur. So it does create a high level of risk, but we're in unusual times, so we certainly could do that.
Thank you.
Brilliant. And again, I come back to the rating agencies, Tina. They would probably look at the overall load on our balance sheet. That's the other impact. But having said that, I agree with Paul that 250 sits there. Okay, Paul. Just I think we've gone through. I think I've included everybody. So if I could just ask, just a wee bit of clarity. Could you just, it was useful the other day when you took us through it. Can I just get you to look through the three graphs just to very quickly indicate the nature of the three differences? Just for the benefit of the meeting as a whole, because I think it's actually they are quite important to understand, make certain we understand as well, please.
Sure. Robin, is it possible for you to bring them up? Is that possible, or is it easier if I just talk to them?
Yes, I can. Just give me one moment. I'll share my screen. If you can let me know that it's showing correctly, that would be useful. So I'll see how we go. How's that look?
Yep, we can see it. Thank you, Robin. That's at least a good start.
Can you make it any bigger?
Yeah.
That's better.
That's
so
good.
in terms of the three graphs that we produced, scenario one, which is on the screen at the moment, shows the pre-COVID plan at the 235% level and the capital program between 200 and 244 million. So that was what we basically went to the public with, that we could deliver up to 244 with the current rating level at 7.6. So that's the first one. Still recognising the fact that from the years 21, 22 onwards, we still have significant work to do around that capital program moving into the long-term plan. So that was, and the comment I made about the ratio exceeding for a year. More comfortable with the ratio exceeding for a year if that was more of a flatlined number than the green line being the steady increase. So that's the concern that sits with that. If we could just flip to the next one, Robin. So scenario two, that shows the mid-range number. So that's the 40 million scenario effectively within that, and you can see the capital program falling down to 120, or in the event that we continued with the full capital program exceeding that ratio up to 286%, so breaching that 250% covenant at that point. And then the third scenario is the 77 million, and it's a bigger number again, just in terms of that ratio moving well in north of 300, or a very small capital program to be delivered. So they were the three scenarios that we've modelled. Just to point out that there is a lot more work going into the detailed modelling. That was very much a desktop exercise undertaken largely by finance and Bay Venues. There's more detail to go into that. But it does show the extent of the problem. And the other thing that I would note is that there still is significant cost that we haven't taken out in terms of making some of those number assumptions, that if we're unable to actually reduce some of that cost, that puts further pressure on that ratio as well. So they're the three scenarios that we've got modelled for the purpose of this paper.
So, thanks for that, Paul, and I think they're really important graphs. I firstly I'm totally on board your advice that these are your preliminary views, and obviously there is substantial work that's going on. If I was to look at the best case, the $40 million reduction scenario, what would 120 million in capex give us? Do you know? Any sort of thumbnail sketch?
Oh, look, off the top of my head, it would be the completion of a number of probably the major projects like Waiari plus a renewals program. There would not be that much left over from that, I think, and that's close to 100 million just of those two groups of programs. So it would be a significantly reduced program as to what was planned.
Which is good, because I think in the long run, as we move through this process over the coming months, it is going to be critical to characterise what actually 40 or 120 or 244 actually means, let alone the straight numbers and where they sit with the ratio. So that's fine. Okay, look, we're going reasonably well for time. I would be quite comfortable if as a result, everybody hadn't had a chance to speak. If there are any follow-up or supplementary questions people would like to ask. So I only see 4 of you at any one time, but if you could either put a note on the chat that you'd like to ask a question, or indeed perhaps raise your hand. But I think, John, you have got in there first. Is that right?
Yeah, thanks, Bruce. Look, the charts are helpful. Paul, is there any adjustment being made to OPEX in those 3 scenarios? And the reason I suggest that, obviously, is if we take the Shammerbill thing, and if we cut our OPEX and use the revenue that would otherwise support that OPEX to support CAPEX, what level or how far are we along that line of investigation?
Thank you, Councillor Robson. So not in those scenarios, no, but it is something that, and that's one of the things that we want to talk to Councillor further about over the next few weeks, in terms of what that might look like in terms of some of those options that will assist with reducing that OPEX, noting that revenue loss.
Well, as I say, the revenue loss, of course, can be not a revenue loss. The revenue could, in fact, be put towards CAPEX, couldn't it? You just shift the revenue from OPEX to CAPEX via some means, a debt reduction levy, in inverted commas, being the classic method for doing so.
That would be as you say, that would be our method of doing it, would be to actually any reduction in OPEX would be, and retaining rating levels would mean that the balance effectively is giving to debt reduction, which gives us more capacity for capital investment. Yes.
Thank you. You're making Shammerbill very happy. Thank you.
Well, that does reflect, doesn't it, Paul, the need to keep up your rating levels, which, becomes a really critical part of our conversation here. Calvin, I think you've asked got your hand up in effect.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Can hear you well, Calvin.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah. So are we going to have an opportunity to talk through some of the DIA report? And is this the opportunity to ask a couple of questions?
Yes, look, yes, it is. It's in the agenda, and
that's cool. That's cool. Just wanted to make sure.
But I'm happy
okay. Thank you. Thanks. So on page 35 of our agenda, and looking at paragraph 75, it's talking there about councils having some CCOs with uncalled capital, and there was specific reference to Christchurch City Council, which looked a little bit scary to me. So, Paul, do we have any situations where any of our CCOs are in that situation?
Yes, Councillor Clout. Bay Venues Limited has an amount of uncalled capital. If Mohan's on the call, he can give you the detail exactly how much that is. But we are do have that situation with Bay Venues Limited.
So if we don't get that information right now, if someone can perhaps email us what the quantum of that is, please.
Yes, I'll just ask if Mohan can come on and answer that if he's available. Otherwise, we'll email it.
Mohan here, councillors. We have got 17 million as our uncalled capital with BVL.
Okay, and does that present any risks or problem for us in the immediate future or not?
No, it's there as a big capacity for BVL that was set up on that basis. I suppose we have also got a loan agreement with them, so they can draw down on any operating losses. So that's the other way to do it, will be to draw down the uncalled capital. Preferred way is to use a loan facility. We can manage it better. Directors would need a capacity to sign solvency certificates as part of the Companies Act. So you couldn't have nothing there.
Okay, no, thank you. And my other question is, I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment. I noticed that on the graph on our agenda page 44, the percentage of business rate income by council, and you'll see that, you know, Tauranga City Council's got pretty much the lowest level of rates coming from the business sector, which of course ties in with our very low commercial differential. So that's just a point that I'm making. It sort of emphasises the fact, you know, something that we already knew, but it's interesting to see that in that particular graph, you know, we are, of all the metros, we're the lowest in terms of collecting business rates. So I'll just make that point for everyone's understanding. Thank you.
Thanks, Calvin. Appreciate that. Jaco, you've got a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, with this report, they ask for feedback from councils a number of times. So what has Tauranga City Council sent back to the COVID response unit?
Through the chair, we've given what basically the updated financial forecasts after council have seen them. So they've seen the numbers around the original 53 to 77 million. There's also a survey that they've put out due in today from all of local government just to get clarity around rating levels. And that will be combined in terms of actually getting a picture across the sector in terms of the sort of financial change and revenue predictions that have changed over the last 6 weeks.
So critical. So I guess perhaps as a follow-up point, then, Jaco, to yours, they have got current information from us. It's information that we're comfortable with, and I think you're also reflecting there, Paul, that it's information that the councillors to date have seen. Albeit it's very interesting, as Kelvin's pointed out, to see how we compare with the other metros, let alone the other councils. Jaco, has that satisfied your question, or is there anything else you want to raise, mate?
Just unmuting myself. Yeah, that answers that question on that one. I did have a question about our application as a growth council to MHUD. Just wondering if we've had any indication on how that's going, or from our partners, and whether we can make that application public.
I'm happy to respond to that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Christine.
So that application has been provided by Smart Growth, because it was issued by the Smart Growth partners. It's been provided to the media, and I understand it was going on to the Smart Growth website late last week. I haven't checked that it is actually posted up there, but it was to be made public. TCC redacted a few commercially confidential parts of it before it went through there. We haven't yet had any response in terms of timeframes. We know that the Minister has been briefed on the contents of the Urban Growth Smart Growth submission, but we haven't had any indication on when that may be responded to.
Okay, thank you.
Heidi, I think you've got a question.
Yeah, hi. I just have a question around the capital program and Waiari. What are the risks of us if Waiari was not in this annual plan, in terms of have we looked at what our goals are in terms of trying to get as many people employed in the local community, and does Waiari stack up in terms of those short-term goals for getting as many people employed to keep everybody trucking along? And what if it was actually a range of different smaller projects that had multiple benefits across many different small business sectors instead? Have we looked at that, what our other options are, or are we kind of tied into Waiari or nothing?
Maybe I'll start that, and Nick, if you want to chip in. But given the stage of Waiari, I guess is the question of where that project is at. But I know Nick has been doing some work around the criteria for other projects. If you want to add to that, Nick.
Yes, I'm happy to chip in there. So we're looking at a number of criteria for how we create the programs for the different scenarios, and basically taking the approach, Heidi, that everything is up for grabs. So we will share a first cut of what that looked like in not too distant a future. So it's part of the annual planning framework that we will talk about later. So basically looking at criteria, what does it mean to delay, mothball the various contracts, and in terms of any impacts it might have, whether it's creating job opportunities or other sector related. It could also be something like consent conditions, legal requirements, contractual requirements that have to be considered. So we have a suite of criteria that we will assess against each of those projects.
And if I could just follow up really on Heidi's behalf, that means in effect this is part of the thinking and the process that we're going through in the course of May, Nick.
That's right.
Heidi, do you have any other questions you'd like to ask Heidi?
No, thank you.
Thank you. John, I think you've got a follow-up question, mate.
Yeah, follow-up from Jaco's question, or Councillor Arbery's question. With regard to the questionnaire response to the DIA, could we see a copy of that, or could we circulate a copy? I don't know what format the questionnaire we completed is, but is there any chance of circulating a copy of the answers that we gave to the elected members?
Yes, we can do that. I'll just check with Catherine in terms of the format, because it was a digital survey, but I'm sure we can get something off there.
Thanks, Paul.
Brilliant. Do we have any more questions at this stage? I think I've got to the bottom of my list. Robin, if I'm being the useful chair, has anybody else got any questions they want to ask at this stage for clarity, or should we move to the motion?
Bruce, I just had a clarification on Kelvin's question to Paul. I used the hands up feature, but you may not have spotted it.
Well, it hasn't come up on mine, sorry.
Sorry, Larry. It's further up. That's okay. It's just
yeah, it is too.
and to Mohan, with that BVL question about the uncalled capital at 17 mil, and then last week we increased the two-way loan agreement. So it's plus, it's both, isn't it? I just want to get that clarified so we are clear with the public. They have the two facilities.
Yes, it's both. Yep. But we would look to manage their working capital through the two-way loan agreement. Yep.
Yeah. Thank you, Tom.
Well, I wonder now, that in terms of the stage of the meeting, this very good paper, Paul, I do want to extend my gratitude to you and your team for this. If we could perhaps move to the motion as it stands in the paper. And I'm wondering if I could have a mover and a seconder for this, please.
I'm happy to move it, Tina.
That's Tina. Thank you, Tina. Do I have a seconder?
Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew. Appreciate you moving it. So we have the motion as it stands. Tina, you're welcome to speak to your motion.
I just want to echo what Bruce has said there. It's a great report, and yeah, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you.
Brilliant. Andrew, is there anything you'd like to add, mate?
No, I think that let Paul get on with getting the numbers, let's say, more shiny and prepared for a future meeting, and then we'll know a little bit more. But I think the process is underway, so good on you, Paul, and your team. So nothing else to add.
Does anybody else would like to speak to this motion at this stage?
Yeah, Bruce, John.
Go for it, John.
Yeah, I think obviously the public can see this, and we're making a commitment and see that, well, we're obviously recognising a need to reconsult. I suppose we just need to make sure that we have the answer to the question that's going to come in, if it hasn't already been emailed in by someone in the public, when and how. So yeah, I just hope the old comms team are across that, because I'm sure that question's already arrived on someone's desk. But you're happy with the motion, happy to support.
Thank you. Right, chance for final.
I wouldn't mind a few words, Bruce. Jaco here.
Go, Jaco.
So I just want to say that I'm in favour of the process that Council's going through this scenario analysis when we have high uncertainty levels. Makes good sense. So we'll get our optimistic, pessimistic, realistic cases, and then as information unfolds, we find out which scenario we're trending towards, our plans can adapt and change. So I really think flexibility is important, and I think Council's on the right track with that. I did want to indicate some of my thinking for future decisions, because sometimes staff don't really know where our heads are at. So, my personal view is that we should be looking at the 250%. I think austerity during recessions worsens recessions. I think government needs to be a counter-cyclical investor. But there will be parts of the organisation that remain closed or have unnecessary expenditure during all the scenarios, and we should be trying to strip out expenditure from those parts of the organisation.
Good.
So yeah, I think leave it at that. Overall, in support of the motion, and or actually, when we're reconsulting with community, I think it needs to be clear that this is a highly adaptable situation, and that the annual plan is likely to change, and that we're likely to have to reconsult, and that this isn't going to be set in stone. And I think it really should be focused at a high level.
Thanks, Jaco. If I could just add a small piece here. I was talking with Christine earlier in the day, and both her and I have been through many annual plans, and we were trying to work through, have we struck this sort of situation of the need for what you are quite clearly focusing on as flexibility, and we couldn't think of any other annual planning scenario, or even going into a long-term plan scenario where things have been so uncertain, and the need to hold open as long as possible within the extent of what's reasonable, you're establishing what is best information before setting a plan. So it also ties back to your point, John, about actually somewhere we're going to have to state when. So I suspect that's still got to come, but it does reflect a highly unusual situation for any council, let alone Tauranga, at this stage. Is there any other questions or any other points that people would like to raise in regard to the motion?
Yeah, I'd like to.
Yes, go for it.
Heidi. Thank you. I just agree with John in terms of we need to let the community know as soon as possible, and even now signal the fact that we're going to be doing a reconsult, because there's a lot of work goes into this consultation. Documents from our community, they spend hours and hours, and if they're doing it on the basis of the one we've got now, if they're going to be turning around and doing it on the basis of a new one, and we're expecting them to then go out and do that, we want them to signal the fact that that will happen and when. So that would be a good thing. The other just point I wanted to talk about is the idea of keeping in mind that, and I know that this is probably happening behind the scenes, but how can we spread the load between our staff, rather than if we have to get rid of, if we have to lose some staff, we want to keep that as spread across the board as we can. So maybe looking at things like a 4-day week or a 3-day week, rather than axing some people completely. And I don't know whether that work is being done at the same time, but it would be great to think of our organisation and its staff as people we want to hold on to as much as we can through this process.
Can I take that, Heidi, as again in a similar vein to Jaco, that that's an expression of your views, and we take that on board in terms of advice and see where we go, rather than looking for a direct response from management right at this stage, if that's okay, Heidi.
Sure.
I'm just trying to keep track of my chat. Is it Kelvin? Are you next on that list?
I think Dawn might have wanted to go before me, if I remember.
Oh, sorry, Dawn. Go for Dawn.
Yeah, hey, that's no problem at all. Yeah, no, that's no problem at all. I just was basically reiterating what everyone else is saying, that, yeah, the sooner that we can get out to the community with something, and obviously there will be community members listening to this meeting today, but the sooner we can get out with something and just sort of include them in what's going on, the easier and better it will be for them to understand, and that can be done quite easily, I think. So, yeah, just reiterating that. Thank you.
I think if I could add my concern, though, and that one, Dawn, not to rebut, by the way, but to agree with your point, but also to reflect what we go and consult on with the community is critical now, for a couple of reasons. One, I think one of the previous speakers virtually said consultation fatigue, equivalent, my words. but also it's really important that we know what we are consulting them over. And I think the problem we have, not problem, but the challenge we have is to identify, as we're seeing with the scenarios, that actually there's quite a moving feast here, even at this, unfortunately, in planning term and time, this late stage of the cycle. But I don't disagree with your point that actually we need to try and give as much certainty as we can to the community, including when we've got to come back and talk to them. Right, I think it might be to Kelvin this time.
Yeah, thanks very much. We had a brief chat about this yesterday, these recommendations, and one of the issues came up with B about the fact we're using the time frame end of May 2020. So just wondering if there was any need for that May to stay, or whether we should be looking at extending that by another month or even 2. So that's more of a question to staff in terms of the wording of that recommendation B.
Through the chair, I think you would be fine just to cease that sentence after the end of the word budgets. So recognise the need to significantly recast capital and operational budgets, and take the reference to date out.
Well, I mean, I'm comfortable with that. If others are, or the mover and seconder are.
Yes, because in reality we're in a moving feast, aren't we, Paul? So to time bound it at this stage seems a wee bit presumptive at this stage. Tina and Andrew, I think as mover and seconder, is that an amendment we can make without too much fuss?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah,
Andrew?
that sounds fine. That sounds fine.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. You appreciate it. That's good.
Right, Larry, I think I've still got your hand up. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you, Bruce. And thanks, Kelvin, for bringing that up. I think it is a sensible move to just amend that without the date. I want to support your comments, Bruce, about taking as much time as we need to for the decision. We've had a long tradition in Tauranga City Council of doing capital projects and infrastructure investment in a just-in-time fashion, trying to hold off as long as we can so we don't have the debt, earlier than we need to. And it's not quite the same, but it is similar in that we need to hold off and make our final decision at the last moment we can, when we have as much information as we possibly can. We've seen other councils rush out and make some very public statements about where they're going. In my view, that's been a bit premature. Whilst I can understand the frustration in the community for not having heard some sort of clear messages from us, I hope they have the patience to wait and know that we're not sitting here doing nothing. We are working very hard, and our staff are particularly working extended time to try and help us make the very best decision we can at the time which we have to do it. So yes, we need to communicate. We need to try and bring people along with us, but this is a very difficult time. And in particular, just signalling, perhaps, I mean, a number of people have brought up Shamabil's advice through a couple of his webinars. It's important, in my view, is that when we come to the rates, that we do take the approach that we target relief to those who really need it, rather than an across-the-board lowest rate possible, which will not put the city in the best position to go forward in a recovery phase. So I think we need to keep that in mind as well, and I hope that the community understand we are wanting to help those who need it, but we also need to keep our city well positioned for the future. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. Chat there. I've tried to do a small check of who has had a chance to speak to the motion and not, and I think if my list is right, Bill, Steve, or Tenby, you haven't spoken. No problems about that, but do you wish to at this stage before I put the motion?
No, I'm fine. Thanks, Bruce. Thank you.
Thanks, Tenby.
No, thanks, Bruce. Nothing to add.
Rightio.
Can I just make one comment here? Sorry, Bill.
Go, Tina.
I'm jumping a little bit, but before we put the motion on B, we're recognising the need to recast capital and operational expenditure in the absence of financial support. I wonder if we want to just recast that regardless. Because is that
Right.
referring to the SIP funding there? I just wonder if we might want to just take that out. We're just recasting that anyway.
I think if I've got it right, Tina, it just reads now after A, B would just simply state recognises the need to significantly recast capital and operational expenditure budgets. That's a given now, isn't it? I don't think there's a doubt that we're doing that anyway.
There's not a disclaimer in there. Yeah, good.
Whereas the continuation of the old motion made it conditional. We're saying we need to do it anyway, which I think is probably the feeling of the meeting, to be honest. So yeah. Look, so I take it there is no more comments or offerings to make in relationship to the motion. My last call. Right. Could I please put it then? It's being moved by Tina and seconded by Andrew. The recommendation as you have on your paper with the agreed change to B, which takes out the last phrase as we have just indicated. What I propose to do in putting the motion is the effect that we do take a division. I will read out the names in alphabetical order. If you could please record whether you are in favour for it or no against, that would be great. So look, if I just go down that list, and Robin, hopefully you'll record them. Please, Councillor Arbery.
Yes.
Councillor Baldock.
Aye.
Councillor Clout.
Aye.
Councillor Granger.
Aye.
Councillor Hollis.
Aye.
Councillor Hughes.
Aye.
Councillor Kitty.
Aye.
Councillor Morris.
Aye.
Mayor Powell.
Aye.
Councillor Robson.
Aye.
Councillor Salisbury.
Aye.
And I, as independent member, record my vote for the motion as well. Aye. Take it we have that carried, and that's tremendous. Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Better just check, Robin, that I'm in good form here. I think that gets us to the end of the meeting. There are no late items that have either said prior or even have come up now. So at this point, I'd declare the meeting closed. Thank you for your time. Again, if I could just leave it that again, thank you to the leadership team for their lead. I will look as independent chair with great interest in the next round of this, but I know obviously there's lots of other discussions between now and the next meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Great meeting.
Thank you, Bruce.